I echo the MC's voice and notes of welcoming all of you all and Dr. Subramaniam toward the start of the Bangalore Literature Festival in its 13th edition. Just to set context to the session, in every era, musicians, artists texture the sonic landscape with their musical aesthetics, sense, and sensibilities. We as listeners are very enriched in our time to experience the music of Dr. L. Subramaniam, a renowned violinist and a composer. His musical aesthetics and compositional logic has sort of textured for the last 7 decades the Indian subcontinent and the world. The book Raga Harmony is composed on the plinth of raga and harmony, two foundational aspects of Indian and Western classical music. Dr. Subramaniam has traveled across geographies with his violin and music, the journey layered with raga and harmony. In conversation with Dr. Subramaniam, his written word on his musical notes. Thank you for listening. So as they say in the song, in Sound of Music, let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. Having been immersed in the art form of music for so many years, what was in the Western classical tradition would be the do-re-mi moment, and in Indian classical tradition would be the sa-pa-sa moment. How do you look back on those early years? Sound? You take this. You need to give sound.
Hello.
Why don't you take this here? In the meantime.
Namaste and good morning, and thanks to Sadhana ji for kind introduction. Whenever anybody asks me about my life, taught, trained, and almost directed in one direction by my parents, especially my father, who was a violinist, Professor V. Lakshmi Narayana. Earlier, my father used to teach my sisters, they used to sing, and he taught my elder brother Vaidyanathan violin. He was a fantastic violinist. Unfortunately, he's no more. He was an extraordinary violinist, Vaidyanathan. So he wanted me to learn either vocal, because those days violin was basically an accompanying instrument. They used to play with other people, not as a main solo instrument. So his dream was to make a violin solo instrument globally recognized. So he said, like Western artists, Menuhin and other people are playing, we should be playing our violin. They should not think we are playing ethnic or folk music, sitting on the floor and playing. So for that, basically, we have to transform the technique, introduce new techniques, introduce very tough, difficult techniques, which it is not easy to follow by other people. So he thought he will teach me vocal and teach my elder brother violin. But fortunately, when I was young, I had diphtheria. So somebody told my father I might lose my voice. So I always wanted to play the violin like my father, and I want to be like him. So, but he said, no, do the vocal, because, you know, your elder brother is playing the violin, and we'll try to change things. But fortunately, he put me into different instrument. Finally, I ended up in violin. But at that time, he was a visiting professor in Jaffna College. And so he used to, he was a very disciplined, it's not like an easy thing, very disciplined, focused person, so we have to practice and work hard. So he introduced me to violin music, so I always wanted to be like him, and he also gave that vision that this violin has to be taken globally, and whatever need to be done, we have to do that. So I got introduced to violin.
On that note,
think one at a time.
We share a mic. On that note, though the book, the heartbeat of the book,
Hello?
is larger sound, but let's hear a solo recital. I won't speak about the video. Please hear it, and then we'll speak. Maybe. Would you please play the first? Now, even I muted. It's the Bombay Concert. Spiritual morning at Mumbai, Gateway of India. So you just saw how he made, it's Ragam Chakravakam, which is the notes of the rag invoke piety, devotion, compassion, and how he nuances the notes. Segueing, this video is a perfect segue for our next segment. Every culture world over, every musical culture has 7 notes of music with their additions and extensions, and this forms the basis. It is in the treatment of the notes, it is in the interpretation that music gets its identity. So in Western classical, the music is a vertical progression in terms of harmony. In Indian classical, it's the melodic and the horizontal. You know, in the book, you have nuanced musical tonalities with such great detail. Could you just expand on that creative thought? How you make the note really tell its own story?
Basically, as Sadhana ji mentioned, there's only 7 notes in any tradition, but then
Maybe have some. Can we amp the sound on this one? Otherwise, you take this mic. We'll keep. Sorry?
oh, it is on and off.
You're not able to hear. You able to hear me? Okay. So we'll just share. We'll just alternate the mic till you get us the perfect mic.
There are basically 7 notes, but in one octave between one sa to the next sa, there are 12 divisions. So we have 12 semitones, as we call it. In the West also they have the same 12 semitones. But the system in the Western, in our tradition, is different because there they use a tempered system. We use a microtone system. We further divide the 12 into 22 shrutis or microtones because certain ragas are associated with certain microtones which are attached to certain notes. Now, whenever we talk about any tradition, every tradition has their own flavor and ornamentation. We call ornamentation gamakas, or in the north they call it meent. The west they have different ornamentation like vibrato and jazz musician style. They slide between notes. There are different ornamentation. So I always used to say, if anybody just play an open note on the violin, nobody can say what tradition it is, what music it is. But once they start playing a phrase, immediately you say, oh, it's a Carnatic music, it's Hindustani music.
Dr. Subramaniam, they're not able to hear.
Can you increase the volume, please? Oh, still.
I hope whoever is keeping time gives us extra time. So should we arrange the chair? We've exchanged mics several times. We've done it. Is it the location? May I have somebody from the console please come up on stage and help us? Okay. So I think the audience is always right. They gave us that advice 5 minutes back. We'll change.
Yeah, it's because wireless, I think it is.
Yeah. So take this mic.
You don't have a wired mic, can you? Okay.
Now see.
I've not spoken yet. Okay, good. Any case, so whenever we talk about different music, my father used to say, if you just play a few notes back and forth, you are playing dead notes. It's a dead music. But if he can bring life to each note, when he means by life, brings different character, different emotion, different approach, different dynamics. All these things are very important to bring life to a note. Once you feel that life, then people on the other side will also appreciate the music, as opposed to just playing up and down the scale and improvising. It will be a dead improvisation. So even though it's all music is basically 7 notes expanded into 12, the interpretation, the ornamentation, and the color, these all reflect the culture from which the music is created.
So, given your ability and your investment in time in terms of nuancing the note, you've been one of the musicians who've done every kind of collaborations. I think the pioneer in Jugalbandis, working with musicians all across the world. Isn't that true?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
May we have the second video? The one with Lord Yehudi Menuhin. Indian independence. Would you like to share a story with the audience how that collaboration came?
The violinist on the video was Lord Egutu Menuhin, one of the greatest Western classical musician. And he's, in the history of violin, he'll be there, one of the greatest violinists. We were asked to do a concert in the United Nations, New York, to celebrate the 40th year of India. I was asked to play a solo, and he was supposed to play a solo. So when I spoke to him, initially the Indian consulate was trying to reach him. The office said he's busy, he's not available, and things like that. Then they pushed me to talk to him. So I left a message, and I told him this is what we are planning to do to celebrate India's 40th year. Immediately he said he will do it. But then he said, why not we play something together at the end? So I said, what do you like to do? Because Bach and people like Vivaldi, they have written a lot of compositions for two violins. I thought you would like to do one of those things. He said, no, you write a piece, we will do something new. So that's how this came about. But as you see, when we were rehearsing, he wanted to wear a kurta and want to sit and play because he used to do yoga and things like that. As you know, Western musicians normally stand up and play. As a soloist, they don't sit down and play. But he sat because he was very familiar with yoga, and he wanted to sit with me on the concert and hold the violin like normally they do. The funny thing was, we didn't have an extra jibba. I told him I have another jibba, which is, not new. That's all I can give. He said, no, please give that to me. So we both shared both of my jibbas. So we played together. It's one of the most memorable things which changed the trend, because before that, none of the Western violinists, they have never collaborated with anybody. They didn't want to collaborate because they thought Indian music was folk, ethnic, it was a little less, and they used to call everything world music. Only Occidental or Western music was classical music. Everything else they used to imply it is, world music, which include everything and each and everything, which doesn't distinguish. I used to always insist that we have one of the oldest, greatest classical music system. And after 12th century, because of the Persian invasion, things like that, it developed into two beautiful systems. We have Carnatic, Hindustani, and North Indian system. This is not folk. In addition to that, in our country, we have a lot of different folk tradition. Each state has beautiful folk tradition. Each state have spiritual music, ghazals, and Bollywood and everything, Carnatic, classical. So we have variety of systems. So everything has different place. The classical music is classical music.
Musical histories sort of really layer the music in such fine ways. Thank you for that story. Now, coming from collaborations, and so true, the perception that people had about Indian music. You were one of the, the person who brought about a paradigm shift in stating that Indian classical music is also based on scientific inquiry. It's not only esoteric. So the heartbeat of the book is orchestral formations. In the book you mention that you make a very meaningful affirmation that music grows and develops through innovations. And sometimes innovation comes from understanding other cultures. So you've written about over several compositions, performed over 300-400 times with the world's leading orchestras. What was the seed journey? I think it was in Russia where you started to write orchestral compositions. If you could share that story.
Thank you. In early 80s, there was a brilliant producer, Richard Bach. He has produced M.S. Subbulakshmi's albums, Ravi Shankar's album, and different albums, and also some of the great jazz artist albums. So he approached me and said, you should do some collaborative work because of your knowledge. You can change the trend of Indian music and bring it to masses. At that time, normally when you play classical music, always there's a preconceived notion, both in public and also in some of the press people. If you do anything else other than what you normally do, immediately they think you're gone mad. You have diluted, destroyed everything. But innovation is the key thing to take our music to the top. It's very, very important. So one of the things was Richard Bach asked me to do an orchestral piece and told me that, this particular conductor wants you to play your piece. So I met him. I told him, it takes about 6 months roughly to write, because when you write your own piece, whenever we say orchestral pieces, whenever we say Beethoven wrote a piece, Beethoven has written all the notes of the composition. Bach has written all the notes of the composition. So whenever in the West we say we are writing a symphony, we have to write all the notes of the composition. But there was also other trend in India at the time. Some film composers used to write a melody. It was arranged by some other arrangers. But then only the music composer name will be there. There will be an arranger who would have contributed a lot to arrange for the different instruments in the recordings. So when he approached me, I told him, I'll write what assurity I have that after 6 months, if you don't like the piece, you won't be playing it. Because one of my friend who did a PhD in Yale, he has written beautiful composition. He even wrote a violin piece for me, but he couldn't find an orchestra to record and things like that. So he said, no, you write whatever you write, we play, it is confirmed. So I wrote a double concerto for violin and flute with Hubert Laws. To my surprise, it was a huge success. Even in the West, normally they wait for the piece to be over before they clap. But they started clapping in between when I was improvising, cadences and things like that. Immediately after that, Zubin approached me to write, Maestro Zubin Mehta asked me to write a piece for New York Philharmonic. So I told him, I've already spent 6 months and written a piece. Why don't we use this one? He said, no, I want a new piece. We want to premiere it. I will do 4 days with New York Philharmonic in New York. So I wrote a piece. At the time, my mother passed away. So that piece, Fantasy on Vedic Chants, was written as a tribute to her. He also said, why don't you do a tribute to your mother? We'll do it like that. So that piece, we played 4 times in New York, and every newspaper really wrote very highly about the piece. So the next year, the Moscow festival, they wanted me to come and play the same piece. I was living in US at that time, so the ICCR DG called and said, you have to go to Moscow to play this same piece, because India at that time was like, always treated like a third world country. So if Moscow says you come and play, you have to go and play, So our government was a little panicky and said, you have to go and play. So I said, fine, we will do the same piece, not write a new piece. I went and played that Fantasy on Vedic Chants. The chairman and the head of the music composition department, he approached me and said, this is completely different approach to the harmony and it's very powerful and emotional. Can you write a paper on that? Stay here 6 months, write a paper and write a new composition for me. We will give you a doctorate from Moscow Conservatory, which was a very big offer. But at that time, the temperature there was -35. So I said, I'll rather go back to Los Angeles, be with my family. I can't stay here 6 months. So that seed started that time. So that since then, I've written about 10 symphonies has been written and performed all over the world, and about 25 orchestral pieces, many orchestral pieces. So, but all that thought started at that time. So subsequently, I didn't write a paper. Later on, much later, when the Short Publishing, which is one of the biggest publisher in Europe, they published Beethoven and Bach, they said, we want to publish all your music. So they have been publishing all my music. Then I thought I will write the theory of what I did, so that instead of writing it for Moscow, I wrote it for India and got my PhD in Raga Harmony. I did it here. So that has the whole thing.
On that note, we'll go in for a musical demonstration which exemplifies all that we just spoke about. Would you play the third video? Maybe have the volume a little louder. Are you able to hear at the back? The composition is Shanti Priya, composed by Dr. Subramaniam. The conductor was Simon Wright. The reason we selected this musical demonstration is if you saw diverse instrument, diverse people, all coming together to make music as a whole, the collective sound. So Dr. Subramaniam, the book has been your doctoral thesis, and it's a book, Raga Harmony. It's exquisitely simple, and it can be as complex as you want to make it out. Would you like to deliberate upon the revolutionary concept, which is the heartbeat of the book, the 36 scale that you have composed, with which orchestras all over the world could play your compositions?
Normally to write a Western composition, it helps a lot if you also understand the basis of Western music, the orchestration, the different instruments. In an orchestra, there are multiple instruments. If you think of woodwind section, there's a flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon, bass clarinet. You go to brass, there's trumpet, trombone, tuba, and different instruments, string section, violin, viola, cello, bass. Like that, each section has a lot of different instruments. So if you really want to write for an orchestra, if you know the range of the instrument where they sound the best, you cannot, like giving a vocalist very high pitch line which they don't reach, you don't get the best from them. Or very low thing which they're not coming. If you find the best range for each instrument, right, then you can get the best result from the orchestral musicians. So one has to know the orchestration, write the counterpoint. When you write multiple melodies, one melody has to supplement the other melody. So together they create a vertical harmonic motion. Whereas in our music, we just keep a tambura and play a raga with microtones, which is in a different world. We take us emotionally to a different world. So in Western music, what it is important for many people who don't have the opportunity to go West or listen to Western music or learn Western music, they still want to write if they have a very strong foundation in Indian music. Because in Carnatic music, basically there are 72 parent scales. I have combined both the first half and second half of 72 to make it 36 scales, because there are ragas with both perfect fourth and augmented fourth, Pradimadimam, Suddhamadimam, and augmented Pradimadimam. So with the 36 scales, you can create wealth of harmonies. Whatever composition which has been written so far, all the notes, all the harmony can be created within this 36 scales. For somebody from India who wants to write orchestral piece, but unfortunately they have not had the opportunity to learn Western music or go abroad, they can still write it. So this is written to help people, musicians or composers who are focused on one tradition. But even so, but they should be very solid in that tradition. But it helps a lot if you know the Western harmony, counterpoint, theory of the Western part of it. So the Raga Harmony is basically focused on helping composers and also the Western composers. In the West, if you see, every 100, 150 years, the trend of music has changed. They call Baroque music, where it is Bach, Handel, Vivaldi. They wrote in a particular style. After that, people like Mozart, Handel, they came and wrote different style, became classical tradition. Then they went to romantic tradition, Beethoven, Liszt, Chopin, all those people. Then modern things. So every 150 years, they feel like they have to create something different, because whatever has been created that time has to reach the peak. So one feels like, we can't do any more better, so let us create our own tonality. But with the raga system, here, as you know, there are 36 this basic scale with which we can create all the harmony. All the composition you heard are all raga based, and harmony is created within the scales of the raga. None of them is out of the raga. So if you see the Shanti Priya, the first movement is based on, Charikesi. Last movement is Mohanam, the Menuhin pieces like that. So everything is based on different ragas. So once you know the raga, you can create all the harmony. but it will also help to know Western music.
I would urge everyone to read the book. As a researcher, there is such a musical openness, there is a sharing aspect that you have so generously shared, which you would have sort of painstakingly sat to work the note. As a choice, we'd like to play with the musical demonstration which shows the universality of music. Would you play the fourth video? Just give this video, gives a toss to genres, geographies, age, music.
Thank you. This particular composition is called Don't Leave Me. This was written for my father almost 40 years back when he was not well. At the time, doctors predicted not a very bright future. So at the time, this piece was written called Don't Leave Me. This particular album is part of the album called Conversations, which I recorded with one of the greatest jazz violinist, Stefan Grappelli. Subsequently, we played with other musicians like Jean-Luc Ponty and other people. We performed this piece. Rahman, when he heard this piece, he said he grew up listening to this piece and he wanted to, he was fascinated by this piece. So we re-recorded the piece. All the composition which we recorded 40 years back is still being remembered, and different versions have been done by different people. The latest has been this particular version, what you heard. So this tour is called Conversation Tour. We will start January 4th in Chowdhury. Then we play in other cities all over India.
To conclude, in a world so pockmarked with wars, divisive forces, it is in creative endeavors like books, Raga Harmony, which sort of bind us together and actually make us believe that the world is a better place. We are all one, and music notes bind us together. I must apologize to the audience for your patience a conversation with just one mic. Thank you for listening to us with such care. And thank you, Dr. Subramaniam, for being so gracious to be able to share a mic. How are we doing on time? If I don't see a timekeeper, may I open it to, how are we doing on time? May I open it to an audience Q&A? One question, let me ask. I have 5 minutes, okay. Will somebody go with a mic? Would anybody like to ask a question? Excuse me, I see a person there. Would somebody from the console give that gentleman a mic? Okay. No, he wants to ask a question.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's a very broad question. We have basically 7 swaras in sound, in music. In light, we have 7 spectrum of light, that is Vibgyor. Like, is there any, because sound and light is universal. Communication takes place only through sound and light. Does this, the 7 spectrums of light and 7 swaras of music, do they have any commonality?
There have been people who have said they associate different notes with different colors. But when we talk about raga, we talk about different emotions, not only about a particular color, but about different emotions. Beyond everything, just briefly, I want to say something. Also we believe in navarasas. There are different rasas, different emotions. And there is also, we believe in navagrahas, where when you are born, there are 9 planets, planetary position decides one's future, destiny. People can predict. A very well-versed astrologer or person who knows the planets can predict like that. But as far as colors and music go, there are certain colors associated with certain notes.
Right? We have time for one last question. There's a lady there. We're recording.
Thank you. Sir, I watched on YouTube a most beautiful concert on the banks of the river Ganges on Shivaratri, I think it was. I repeat and repeatedly watch it. Can you tell us a bit about the background of that composition and how it came about? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. There are twice I played in the banks of the Ganges. Once for our Kanchi Kamakodi Jayantara Saraswati Swamiji's 70th birthday celebration. They have put almost tied 2 boats, and we were playing in one boat. I don't know whether you mean that one. That's the one. Okay, the other boat he was sitting. So where, it was a beautiful evening setting where there are no chairs. They were all sitting in the, stairs of, when you walk down, from the top you walk down to Ganges, there are steps. People were sitting the steps and everything. That was also a very beautiful moment for me because I never played sitting in a boat in Ganges before. And number 2, like Swamiji Jayendra Saraswati was almost singing with me in many of the compositions. And he was such, culturally he was, one thing is spiritually, he's totally in a different plane. But culturally also, when we used to say certain composition, like Mokshamu Kalata, which has a lot of meanings, he used to ask me to play and he used to sing with us. So that made me, doubly happier, because I'm not only playing my own thing, but there's a saintly person who is listening and blessing me. And also a lot of people get to see him and listen to me, which is a fantastic combination. So I can never forget that. There's another, one Shivaratri, I played for another Swamiji, Shantananda Swamiji from Malaysia, where they were trying to do Abhishekam for about 1,000 lingam or 100 lingams and things like that. That time when I played, after I finished playing, the Swamiji, Shantananda Swamiji said there is one Avadhuta who was sitting there in the corner, and he was materializing and giving fruits and things to people. You should go and get his blessing. And you know, Avadhuta says you can't, suddenly you see them, suddenly you don't see them. And they were trying to offer some money. He was getting a little irritated and everything. Finally, I was trying to see, I couldn't find him. Finally, I went and sat for the Abhishekam. Suddenly, I turned around, he was next to me. And Kavita was next to me. So he drank a little bit of milk which was given to him and gave to Kavita and to me to share the milk. So these are the two times I played there which I can never forget. Thanks.